We're here to discuss the little Gazas that have risen up on campuses across America and the liberal college administrators and politicians who refuse to restore law and order and to protect other students. These little Gazas are disgusting cesspools of anti-Semitic hate, full of pro-Hamas sympathizers, fanatics, and freaks. Here's just a sampling of what these lunatics were saying just days after Hamas's atrocity against Israel. A Cornell professor called the October 7th attack exhilarating. A Columbia professor called it awesome. A Yale professor called it an extraordinary day. More than 30 Harvard students signed a letter claiming that Israel was, quote, entirely responsible for the attack. A pro-Hamas student group at University of Virginia called Hamas terrorists Palestinian resistance fighters. And remember, this was all before Israel had seriously retaliated. The terrorist sympathizers in these little Gazas aren't peacefully protesting Israel's conduct of the war. They're violently and illegally demanding death for Israel, just like their ideological twins, the Ayatollahs in Iran. Just look at what's going on in these little Gazas. These criminals are chanting eliminationist slogans like, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, and globalize the Intifada. At Stanford, they wore Hamas headbands. At Princeton, they flew the Hezbollah flag. At Harvard, they ripped down the Stars and Stripe and replaced it with the Palestinian flag. At George Washington University, they called for the final solution and posted signs saying they wouldn't leave until Jews go back to their real homes. And look at some of the consequences. At Columbia, a rabbi had to tell students that the university was no longer safe for Jews. At UCLA, Hamas sympathizers blocked Jewish students from attending classes and assaulted Jewish students. USC canceled its graduation out of fear of pro-Hamas riots. It's time to stop these anti-Semitic pro-Hamas mobs today. And if liberal college administrators won't take action, the mayors and the governors of these campuses should. And so should Joe Biden. When will the president himself, not his mouthpieces, condemn these hate-filled little Gazas? President Biden needs to denounce Hamas's campus sympathizers without equivocating about Israelis fighting a righteous war of survival. The State Department needs to yank the visas of foreign students in these little Gazas, and DHS needs to deport them. The Justice Department should investigate the funding sources behind these little Gazas, and the Department of Education needs to withhold funding for colleges that won't protect the civil rights of their Jewish students. Instead, Joe Biden is putting more pressure on Israel these days than he is on Hamas itself or on the pro-Hamas chapters on America's campuses. But I guess that's what we should expect from the leader of a Democratic Party that has let its anti-Semitic elements fester and grow for years. Another 4 years for Joe Biden means another 4 years of little Gazas all across America. And that's something I suspect the American people will keep in mind this November. Senator Cornyn?
Protests are nothing new in our country. They are constitutionally protected by the First Amendment, but it's also very clear that that these institutions can regulate the exercise of those First Amendment rights based on time, manner, and place restrictions, neutral criteria. But as you've seen since October the 7th, the line between protesting and rioting has been crossed time and time again on college campuses across the country. Places like Columbia and Yale, some of the most elite, privileged institutions in America, pro-Hamas rioters have taken over buildings, threatened Jewish students, and prevented students from pursuing the very reason they're there, which is their education. I suggest that these administrations take notes from my friend UT Austin President Jay Hartzell, who has taken swift action to break up demonstrations before things turn violent. Yesterday, the University of Texas in Austin announced that nearly half of those arrested on Monday had no affiliation with the University of Texas. In other words, the mainstream media would have you understand, or would suggest that these are somehow students who are outraged at what's happening in the Middle East. But in fact, in Texas, and I bet the same number holds in other parts of the country, that nearly half of those are not students at these institutions. What they did find when they arrested some of these outside agitators was guns, mallets, and other weapons that were confiscated by law enforcement. These obviously are people not interested in peaceful protests. These are funded by many of the same outside groups like George Soros, other dark money groups that support Antifa and other riots that we've seen in our American cities in the past few years. The right to peaceful protest is a fundamental right, as I started out by saying, but it does not grant any of us the ability to damage property, threaten the safety of others, or violate the rules of our university campuses. Senator Langford.
Tom, thanks for pulling this together and for making it so clear of what we're trying to accomplish. Every university and every student has the right to be able to speak their mind, to be able to test out new ideas. It's the nature of being on a college campus to be able to both speak out and to be able to think through different things. But when you're talking about screaming at Jewish students and rabbis saying no longer is this university a safe place for you to be, it violates the very principles that all these universities supposedly stand for. Literally in these locations where Jewish students are being told it's not safe for you to be there anymore, I can't imagine any other group on campus that university officials would say it's no longer safe for you to be here. These are the individuals that should have the right to be able to go to their education and to be able to speak their own mind, yet they're being intimidated and harassed, screamed at with words of genocide, have a protest sign held in front of them that says resistance by all means necessary. Everyone understands what that means, but that group actually holds that up. That is including violence, including October the 7th. Listen, we're a nation that prides ourselves on the right to be able to speak out, but we're also a nation that says you cannot go and intimidate someone else in the process. When law is broken on that, then law needs to be enforced. If you do not enforce criminal activity, then you'll get more criminal activity. And we're seeing it in some of these privileged universities where they're allowing individuals to be able to come and to be able to clearly violate the law and then assume it's not going to get worse and worse and worse. It is, and it has, and it will continue to, till we actually have clear parameters of, yes, you can speak your mind, yes, you can say a dumb thing, but no, you can't intimidate other people. And again, for universities that pride themselves on creating safe places on their campus to literally create environments where they know they're going to thrive in crime and they're going to have people take over buildings and try to relive the glory days of the 1960s and protests, what they're really doing is continuing to intimidate other students, and they know it, and they're winning. When graduations get canceled, when classes have to move, the violent protesters, they're actually winning the day. So this is up to universities. Quite frankly, we've all been very clear, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition that the State Department has used for years to be able to define anti-Semitism, the Department of Education has refused to use, and many university presidents have refused to use, and left an ambiguous definition saying, of course you can speak out against Israel. Of course you can. But even in the IRA definition, you can disagree with the Israeli government, but you can't call for genocide. That moves into anti-Semitism, and that should be something that we actually speak out on and make very clear on every single campus.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Senator Cotton, for organizing this important discussion on a very disturbing issue. What we're seeing on college campuses is total chaos. And we all know that universities have an obligation to provide every single one of their students a safe learning environment. That's not happening. We saw it again on the news last night. These are violent protests. This is occupying university buildings. This is breaking the law. And then you add in the vileness of looking at other students and making disgusting anti-Semitic statements to those students, not allowing them to participate on their own campus in their educational endeavors. This is beyond the pale. And I think many of us recognize that. Not many of us are speaking up. And we certainly don't hear it from most of the elected officials. We certainly don't hear people speaking up on university campuses. We certainly don't see any kind of strong positive action by university officials. Instead, we see chaos. We see vileness. We see hate. We see growing division. But there's one group, well, there's really a couple groups, that are supportive of this. Hamas is a terrorist organization. They kill babies. They kill old people. They still have Americans held as hostages in Gaza. Report that. Report that. And now we see these actions on campus, which Hamas supports. They're endorsing these protests. We see the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Khomeini. He's publicly applauded the growing number of protests, the growing number of encampments that have sprung up on college campuses. He celebrates the flying of Hezbollah's flag in streets in the United States. Let's be clear. Do we see Iran or Hamas supporting protests
Here.
in their jurisdiction? No, we don't see them supporting it. In fact, we see them cracking down on any kind of protest. Any kind of protest. And they have been criticized by the Human Rights Watch for those actions. So let's understand what's happening here in the United States. What's happening is a growing anti-Semitism. What's happening is chaos on college campuses, not free speech, but criminal activity and violence. And it's time that we demand that students, all students, are protected in this country and that they have their rights protected as well. Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Deb.
Now I get to hit him.
You get to hit me. You can hit me upside the head. Knock me in the next week. What we're seeing at some of our college campuses is a rule by the mob. That's what many of you, not all of you, but many of you would call a threat to democracy if it were being perpetuated by Republicans. Democrats seem to be able to do it without consequence. That's point one. Point two, we shouldn't paint with too broad a brush. Some of our universities have done a good job. I'll mention three. Vanderbilt, Tulane, and the University of Florida. They have done a good job in dealing with this rule by the mob because of their leadership. The presidents of those three universities are passionate advocates of free speech. They understand that the Constitution protects free speech against government, but it does not protect disruptive behavior. And they understand that the First Amendment to the Constitution makes a distinction between speech and behavior. And it's not complicated. You don't have to be Oliver Wendell Scalia to figure that out. All you have to do is read the document. And so I want to thank them. I think the President of Columbia could learn a lot from them, an awful lot. Point 3, I think much of the problem comes from members, some members, not all, but some members of these universities' faculty. There are members of the faculty at some of these universities who believe in diversity, equity, inclusion, and the right to kill Jews. They do. Now, this is America. You're entitled to believe what you want. It may be an evil thought, but you're entitled to believe it. You're not entitled to act on it. And many of these professors, not all of them, not at all universities, but many of these professors, instead of celebrating their universities as a diverse place of diversity and ideas, they are convinced they are right, and they want to punish people who disagree with them. And that's a big part of the problem. Final point, President Biden could stop this stuff on a dime. On a dime. How can I put this? It just goes to show you that even old people can suck. Okay? All he would have to do is pick up the phone and call the president of Columbia University quietly and say, Madam President, how you doing? Listen, I don't have a lot of time, and I know you're busy. You've got 14 days to get control of your campus, or you're not getting any more federal money. Now, she will pounce on that like a ninja. But Joe Biden hadn't done that. And President Biden is not going to do that. And it's not just because even older people can suck. He's not going to do that because of the raw gut politics, and you know it, and I know it. President Biden is scared to death to alienate the Hamas wing of the Democratic Party. And he has read that new CNN poll, just came out, that said that 52% of likely voters, a CNN poll said 52% of likely voters will never, under any circumstances, on God's good green earth, vote for Joe Biden. 52%. 52% will vote for the guy who salts the French fries at McDonald's before they will vote for Joe Biden. And he knows that. And that's why he is doing, or in this case, not doing, what he's not doing at these universities. And you should call it for what it is. Rule by mob. Rule by mob. A belief in diversity, equity, inclusion, and the right to kill Jews. And it's wrong.
So going home to my state, there's quite a few Jewish families that have their kids in some of these schools up north. And I think most of them are having to rethink the safety of their kids. I've talked to some individuals in my state that are at these schools, and they've been for months now scared to death for their safety. So what you see that's going on in places like Columbia University is just, it's un-American, it's disturbing, and it's completely unfair. You know, we send our kids off to school, we expect them to be safe. Expect them to learn something, build relationships, and when they finish, be able to get a job. We don't expect them to be worried about whether they're going to get beat up. Their Star of David necklace is going to be ripped off, any of these things. But we've got university presidents and university faculty that are just wimps. Just wimps. They just cower to this anti-Israel, anti-Semitic crowd, and it's It's crazy. These individuals that believe in what Hamas is doing, why don't they go live in Gaza for a while? Get out of this country. If you don't like this country, you don't like the way we run the country, get out of it. Go to Gaza. See what it's like. See what it's like to live under the rule of Hamas. Now, let's remember what they did. They beheaded babies. They raped girls. They burned people alive. They shot people point blank just for one simple reason. They're Jews. That's what they did. It's as simple. They did that. So if you go protest in favor of them, you support those actions. The president won't say anything because he's worried about losing any votes. He's fine with getting the pro-Hamas crowd to vote for him. He believes he can't take a chance of losing any votes because he is so unpopular. Now, here's what needs to happen. Number one is we need to stop funding these universities. I have a bill that says Stop Anti-Semitism on College Campus Act and Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. And what we do is stop funding it. Just stop right now. I mean, why should a university that spews hatred and anti-Semitism get any of our federal dollars? Number two is if you're faculty or if you're in leadership at a university and you're not willing to stand up, quit. Let's get somebody that cares about Jews, cares about all the students, make sure they're safe. If you're a student and you're at one of these universities and you spew hatred and anti-Semitic, you need to be expelled. You should be never able to go to that university, in my opinion, any university in the country. And then if you're a donor, if you're a volunteer at any of these universities like Columbia, then stop. Do you want to spend your money given to people that just have hatred just because somebody has a different religion than them? This is disgusting. I hope all these universities get held accountable for their anti-Semitic acts and the leadership's